Ambassador Suklal, thank you so much for joining in on CNN News 18. Let's begin with the theme of G20 presidency, which, as we all know, is being hosted by South Africa. Having said that, shed more light on why it's so pivotal, the theme of sustainability, solidarity, equality.
Well, I think if you look at the theme that South Africa has chosen for our presidency, it fits in with previous themes. It builds on that. And perhaps the need of the hour in terms of what's happening globally at the present time. And we saw this accelerate post-COVID. The world is becoming more divided. The fault lines between the global north and south is not getting narrower, they're getting wider. So what the world needs at the present time in order to address our collective challenges is to work in tandem with each other. That's why we need global solidarity. We don't have that. In terms of equality, I mean, what COVID demonstrated is that many people, especially the wealthy, accumulated more wealth during COVID, and the poor got poorer. For example, in Africa, almost 100 million Africans went into extreme poverty. So inequality is on the increase globally, within countries and between countries. And of course, sustainability. When you speak of sustainability, you are not just speaking of the human race, you're speaking of our planet as a whole. And also linked to this is our Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, our world leaders adopted the SDGs in 2015, and we're less than 5 years away. And at the recent United Nations General Assembly, when world leaders met in September, the figures given by the Secretary General in terms of the percentage attained collectively is 18%. And that's after over a decade. So obviously we are far from achieving the SDGs. And at the present time, as you know, in Brazil, we have COP30. And this is 15 years after South Africa hosted COP10. 15 years after Paris Agreement. And we have seen a rollback in terms of our commitments to climate action, our commitments to climate funding, our commitments to sharing of technology to help the poorer and the developing countries in terms of addressing our adaptation
So that
needs.
beautifully ties up with the sustainability theme of G20 as well.
Absolutely.
Having said that, Ambassador, let's quickly also touch upon the G20 agenda and how India has helped mainstream Africa in the G20 agenda, given it was in 2023 under India's presidency that we saw the African Union become a full member of the G20, and Prime Minister will be attending the G20 yet again this year. So having said that, take us through the role that India and South Africa both have played and Prime Minister Modi has played in sort of mainstreaming Africa to G20, and how can both the countries help in aiding each other in this very deeply divided geopolitical climate?
Well, I think firstly we must again express our gratitude to Prime Minister Modi and India for having mainstreamed Africa during your presidency in 2023. It's unfortunate it took 18 summits for the African Union to become a full member, while the European Union from the outset was a full member. And had it not been for the initiative of India during your presidency, we are not sure whether the African Union would be around the table when the G20 convenes in South Africa shortly. So I think India has demonstrated that we have a long historical relationship between Africa and India. Late Prime Minister Nehru spoke of Asia and Africa as being sister continents, and the development in terms of bringing the African Union as a full member into the G20 on the initiative of India is something the whole of the African continent will always remember. it's there for the historical books.
Let's come to the elephant in the room. Donald Trump, the US president, saying that he will be boycotting, or rather, US will be boycotting the G20 because it's happening in South Africa, and they are a country which is an abuser of human rights. He's accused South Africa of orchestrating a genocide. Of course, Cyril Ramaphosa has also come back to that, saying that it is the US loss, and that it's high time to call on this politics of boycott. I'd like your thoughts.
Well, it's very unfortunate. We have the deepest respect for the USA. We have strong relationship and have always had strong relationship with the USA. And it's unfortunate that they will not be at the table at the Johannesburg summit. I think it's a major opportunity lost for the leading global economic power to be party to a very historic meeting that's taking place for the first time on the African continent, and at a time when the world needs solidarity of all of the leaders, irrespective of our differences, to come together and have an opportunity to talk to each other. It is ironical that the USA today wants to speak to countries that they have for a long time isolated, be it North Korea, be it Russia. The current president is very keen to meet with these countries because he says it's important that they speak to each other. Now, likewise, as South Africa, based on our own experience, that it is through dialogue, through exchange of views, that we can address our common challenges. By boycotting the meeting, you are actually the loser in terms of the opportunity you would have had to discuss issues that you may think is happening in South Africa. And as President Ramaphosa rightfully said when he visited the White House in May this year, that all of these allegations being made against South Africa, they are all false allegations. There's no evidence. And it's unfortunate that President Trump has never visited Africa. During his first term as president and now during his second term, he would have had the opportunity to go and experience Africa firsthand and see for himself all of these accusations being made against South Africa. Because you must remember, it was in South Africa that we knew the value of human rights, given the abuses that took place under the apartheid regime. So the democratic dispensation has the highest regard for the preservation of human rights and the respect of human rights. And this is enshrined in our constitution. And the African Union, interestingly, just issued a statement reinforcing the belief of the African continent in the vibrancy of South Africa's democracy, the vibrancy of the South African government, and the leadership we provide, not only within the African continent, but as a responsible member of the international community. So the views of one member state of the G20 doesn't tarnish.
All right. So and it's interesting you say that. Let me quickly come to the aspect of BRICS, because both India and South Africa happen to be key members. But unfortunately, the US president is known to be using tariffs as a foreign policy tool to have an upper hand. And that's why it's important that you also weigh in on the view that he's been peddling, which is that BRICS will come up with an alternate to dollar. Apart from that, I want to ask you, is it the threat of an alternate system to the dollar or the growing size of the bloc, given we've just seen how Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Indonesia, various countries have now joined the bloc, and he's also threatened that there will be additional tariffs on any countries joining the BRICS. So is it the expansion of bloc that's threatening him or an alternate system to dollar?
It's a combination of both. As you know, BRICS has grown to become a powerful platform of the global south. Countries of BRICS today, the 10 member states as a collective, as well as the partner countries, account for over 50% of the global population. We account for over 36% of global GDP in terms of PPP. We account for over 25% of manufacturing. And BRICS is on the rise, despite the threats being made in terms of countries wanting to become members or those that are full members. Not one BRICS country has said we're going to leave the formation. On the contrary, we have a greater surge in the number of countries, despite all of these threats that if you join BRICS, you're going to face consequences. Despite that, the number of countries knocking the door of BRICS wanting to become full members is on the increase. And that demonstrates that BRICS has become a powerful force for global good, that it is doing something right for the global collective. And I think that doesn't sit well on those that have, in a very hegemonic manner, occupied the space to determine what is right for the global community. And those days are on the wane. Secondly, it's obviously natural. At one stage, pre the Second World War, the British pound was the most powerful currency. We didn't know about the dollar. Today, the British pound is not the global currency it once was, and the influence it wielded. So naturally, as other economies grow and rise, other currencies are going to become powerful. And this is already happening in terms of the dollar share within the IMF global basket of currencies. It's decreasing. And I think this is alarming for the USA, but it shouldn't be, because the world is diversified. The USA is the largest economy, but the gap between the USA and other growing economies is going to narrow. And the world will change dramatically in the next 2 or 3 decades. Based on the rapid rise of the global south. Countries like China, like India, like Brazil, South Africa, okay. Indonesia.
Let me quickly now, Ambassador, bring you on the aspect of how Global South needs to unite to fight the threat of terrorism. We speak at a time when Delhi has been confronted with a blast on 10th of November, which has finally been ascertained as an act of terror. First Pahalgam in April, and now the Delhi car blast. What are your thoughts on the threat of terrorism that India is currently confronted by?
Well, first and foremost, as South Africa, we'd want to express our deepest condolences to the loss of lives and also a speedy recovery for those that have been injured. And South Africa stands firmly with India during this difficult period. Now, we have firmly maintained in various statements that there is no place for terrorism in a civilized world. There's no place for terrorism at all. And wherever terrorism occurs, it must be firmly rooted out and taken out of human society. There's no place for terrorism. And countries have to work as a collective, and that is why, for example, you will see in the various BRICS declarations that have been issued every year, there is a dedicated paragraph where all of us agree that terrorism must be rooted out of society and that we must work as a collective to address this threat, not just to one country, but when you have a terror attack in one country, it impacts on the security of all of us. No one is safe, irrespective of where the terrorists may act. So we must work as a collective to get rid of this human scourge.